My name is Jean Featherston. I'm the retail store manager at Archipelago. I'd like to welcome Kim Bernard. She's a professional sculptor, teaching artist, and mentor with over 30 years' experience. She creates art that is recycled, kinetic, interactive, and involves the community. She's currently upcycling plastic trash into art and building sculptural installations in communities throughout New England. In addition to her artwork, she's currently a teacher at Maine College of Art and Colby College. Kim has received many grants herself, and she's a great resource for finding the money. Let's give a warm welcome to Kim Bernard.
Thank you. So I'm going to pass around sticky notes, and you'll all need one of each color. So we'll get these started. Give you one of each. I'll explain what they're for in a moment. Okay, so I'm assuming that you're here because, like me, you do not have a trust fund. So we're going to talk about where's the money, what do you need it for, how much do you need, how are you going to get it, and what do you have to offer back. So these sticky notes are to answer those questions. I also want to say first that I have notes on my whole talk with links to all the things that I'm going to reference. Because there are links in the notes, it's easiest if I email it to you. So if you email me at info@kimbernard.com, I'll have that up at the end too and remind you. Just send me an email, say, I need the notes for getting funding. I'll send you the notes on this presentation. Okay, so that should take the heat off having to scramble and take notes while we're talking. Although I realize that some people need to take notes just to set the information in their brain, which I do too. So there's a lot of money out there for your creative projects. And there are endowments, foundations, funds that have been set up. So knowing that they're there, and there's a lot, and that there's applications that come around in a cycle every year, and knowing how to keep track of what's coming up and what you might apply for funding for is a really important thing for you to do. So this is the first start of how to get funding for your creative projects. So we're going to talk today, okay, I need to stay within the middle here. I've been instructed not to go to the outer edges. So we're going to talk about where you can find funding. We're going to talk about how to write a compelling grant application, and what's in a budget exactly, what you can include and what you cannot include. Other support materials that you can have prepared so that when a grant comes up, you can have half of the material already ready to be submitted, and keep it organized so that you can copy and paste for the next grant application. We're also going to talk about crowdfunding, which is different than writing grants, and fiscal sponsorship, which is also different than writing grants and crowdfunding. So this is what I'm hoping to convey to you over the course of the next hour. And I'll save time at the end and answer questions as well. Okay. So the first thing that's really important to know is that there's a difference between writing a grant as an individual creative person and an organization. So you might be interested in doing both. You might be interested in doing only one. And there's a bit of crossover as well. But if you're writing an application for a grant and it's your job because you work for a nonprofit, for example, you are probably writing a grant as an organization. So an organizational grant, and the Maine Arts Commission has those types of grants, organizational grants. If you're an educator, a teacher, you might be writing a grant for your school, so organizational grant. If you're a creative person, maker, and that could be all different types of disciplines, you are probably looking for an individual artist grant. So know that first, because the searches are different. The application process is slightly different, but there's a lot of crossover. But you don't want to waste your time looking at a grant that you are not eligible for. So when you're looking at grants, there's the first thing to go to is the guideline list, eligibility list. Make sure that you are in the right state, that you are a solo person and not an organization, or vice versa, that you fit the criteria for that specific grant. Here's an example of many different funding organizations that, assuming that you all live in Maine, it's a go-to place. And this is on my notes along with links. So this list is going to be really valuable to you, especially because you're going to be able to click on that link and go to these different organizations. So assuming you're a creative person living in Maine, the Maine Arts Commission is a great resource for you. There are annual grants that come around every year, right around the same time of the year, maybe even the same month and part of the month. So I have an ongoing list, an annual list of grants that I compile for myself that I'm eligible for. You might want to consider keeping an organized list of grants that come up that you could apply for too. And sometimes a grant application comes up and you just have to say, I'm just going to pass on it this year. I'm way too busy. I'm not ready for this. I'll wait until next year, but you don't want to miss it the next year. New England Foundation for the Arts, NEFA, is another great resource. There's a lot of funding for performance-type art projects as well as organizational grants. So there's also visual arts funding, but there's a lot more for performance projects. Creative Ground is a great resource. That's New England-wide. Artwork Archive is a national resource. And they offer other things like ways to archive your work, keep track of your inventory, but they also have great resources for grants that come up. Getting on these websites is the best way to keep informed, because then you have the information coming into your inbox. And they're likely to remind you of the deadlines that are coming up that may apply to you. So having those emails come into your inbox, scanning them, determining whether, okay, this is due in 3 weeks, am I going to apply, am I not, and put it on your radar. The Maine Community Foundation is another great resource, more specifically for organizations. So if you're applying for a grant for a school or a nonprofit or an institution, that's a wonderful resource. The National Endowment for the Arts is the big one, and it's going to be a bit more oriented towards organizations. Imagine a trickle-down effect. So NEA provides funding to these smaller, more regional or state funds that we apply for. So although you may find something on the NEA website that's geared towards what you're doing, there are other more regional grants that are probably less competitive than a national grant that you would apply for. So know about the NEA, know that there's a lot of trickle-down funding that comes to state foundations, regional foundations, but it's less likely that you're going to find a national grant highly competitive that you're going to apply for, and yet the odds are less. Not impossible, but less. So again, sign up for these grant foundations, email newsletters, and have the information come into your inbox. Okay, so we're starting to get into the weeds a bit more here. So, like I said, keep an organized list, categorized by the date. So you might want to have a grant calendar. So you know what grants come up in January, February, March. So you could start to kind of look, all right, now it's almost May, there's 2 grants in May I might apply for. Figure out if this is the year you want to do it. Are you ready? Is the work ready? Do you have time? I really encourage students that take my grant writing workshop with me to apply for something local first. The odds are better that you will receive a local grant than a regional grant or a national grant because the pool is smaller. So your likelihood is far greater. You want to get some successes, you want to get some traction, you want to have some, a grant that's been funded early on, so it'll encourage you to keep going to get that funding. Get specific as well. So what is it you're applying for money to do? Some grants are broad and they fund your work in general. I'm actually in the middle of a grant that's due tonight at midnight. It's the Harpo grant. It's $10,000. It's not a project grant. It's an artist grant. And they don't ask you to explain a narrative of what you're going to do with the funding. They look at the work, they assess the caliber of the work, the quality, and then you receive the funding or you don't. So that's a more general application. A project grant would fund a project very specifically that you would like to embark on. Or perhaps a project that has an ongoing kind of steps to it. So you're asking for funding for a specific component of that grant. And now that's going to be very specific to you, what you do, what kind of project you have brewing or maybe in the works. Those are quite common. So there's a lot of funding out there for project-based grants. So I'm going to jump to the two approaches because it's appropriate here. So there's a couple ways you can approach looking at grants. One will be that you have a very specific project in mind, and you want and need funding for this project. You can't do it otherwise. Or maybe it would take you 10 times as long, or you would have to modify it to a much smaller scale. But you have a project in mind. So you're going in search of funding to get that project off the ground. So you have this project, so as you're scanning grants, you're looking for something that will fund this thing that you want to do. That's one way. Another way would be to come across a grant that looks enticing, looks like you might be able to get this, it's regional, it's kind of local, it funds you, and you see that there's money there. Now you get your brain turning on, what could I do for this grant? What kind of project could I dream up that I could use this funding for? So you could go about this in two different ways. Have a very specific project in mind, go look for the funding, or in your looking at grants, come across nice juicy application, go, what would I do with 15 grand? Get your mind going, and then apply for it. So a couple different approaches. When I say specific, I'm also meaning very specific in terms of where do you live. That could even be the county. It could be the town. Your age, your gender, your race, your heritage, the type of work that you do. So I just applied for a grant. Anonymous was a woman, it's called. It's an environmental grant. So gotta be an email to apply. And you have to be doing work that has to do with the environment. So pretty specific. Now, if it had been more specific, it might have been for an artist, female artist, who lives in Rockland, who does work with upcycled plastic and has curly hair. That's the grant that I want, because I'm probably gonna be the only one that applies. That's what you're looking for. Something where you check all those boxes and you feel like, I think I could get this. So get specific. Look for those grants that are very regional or very local. You also want to start small in your amount of the award. So if the grant is 25 grand, that's a pretty sizable grant for an individual artist. There's gonna be more people applying for that grant because they want the 25K too. So then that same artist that's your competitor might kind of pass by the $1,000 grant. They're looking for more money than that. So you come along and you see a regional grant, local grant for $1,000, $1,500, apply for it. Because there might be people that are passing that one by, and the pool of applicants, your competition might be pretty low. The other thing that does is it puts a grant on your resume. You've now received a grant. You don't write on your resume how much the grant was for, ever. So what's seen on your resume is that you've received a grant. In other words, you've been vetted by another foundation. So the next foundation might take a second look because you've already received a grant. So that's a really good way to get started. I mean, even if the pot of money is small, it's a really good way to encourage you to apply for more and get that line on your resume and give you the practice of having written a grant. Not only written it, but received it, gotten the promotion, public PR for it, followed through with a project, written a report, and been accountable to the foundation that granted the project. So that is all giving you the experience of grant writing and then following through with your project. Okay. So in your writing, you want to start thinking about what can funding do for you? What can you do, what would you like to do that you can't do without a chunk of money? So you might not have the answer right now, but it's a process. And in grant writing, you're starting the process of what will funding allow me to pursue, create, develop, express. So grant writing is a way of getting your gears turning and thinking about what are the possibilities. Could I work with a new medium? Do I need new equipment? Do I need a larger space? Do I need 6 months to do research? If I were to take a sabbatical for my job for 6 months and replace that with grant foundation money, what would that allow me to do? So it really allows you the opportunity to be expansive in your thinking and start considering what can funding do for you. Only write a grant for what you really want to do. Now this seems obvious, but there's this temptation to write a grant for what you think the grant writers want to read. I discourage that completely because if you get the funding, guess what? You're doing that thing that you really wanted to do in the beginning. So only write for what you really, really want to do. Otherwise you're wasting your time. And you really can't psych out the grant reviewers' thoughts on what they are intending to fund anyway. So just write it for you, what you want to pursue. So the exercise in grant writing is helpful even if you don't get the grant in starting to get you to have clarity about what your vision is, what your goals are, how you want to move forward, and what you want to create. So I think I covered all that. Yes. All right. 3 questions for you. I want you to think about what you need funding for and write it on the orange piece of paper. What do you need money for? Now I'm not having you commit to the answer forever. It's just today. And thinking about what funding could do for you today. What could that make happen? You write Next question for you on the green, light green. How much money do you need? For a particular project, perhaps. And when you finish that one, you can go to the third one, which is how will your project contribute? In other words, what's your give back? A foundation isn't going to give you funding to become a hermit and live on an island and never exhibit your work or share it with the world, the public. So how are you going to give back to the community, to the public, by receiving this funding? Great, there'll be more time to work on that. When you leave, there's a wall to the right, just as you exit the door, where you'll put your sticky notes by color, so that you can read one another's, and they're anonymous, right? Okay, let's move on. In writing a compelling narrative for your grant, the first thing you want to do is, remember that the reader knows nothing about you, your art, your project, your history, your creativity, your art school experience, your place in the world, nothing. So it's really important to be clear about we're just going to consider a project-based grant for now. It's really important to assume they just know nothing about your project, and even have someone read your grant before you submit it, so it's clear to this person as well. Ideally to a friend who isn't in your head often and know what you're doing, just to make sure that they understand it and it's clear. So you want to ask yourself, what's the vision of your project going forward? Or what's your artist statement? What is it that you are about to pursue, which is one of the questions. And start to articulate that. So we are visual people, most of us, and we think in visuals, pictures, not always words. So that means you have to articulate, what are you doing? What do you want to do? Start to clarify it so that someone else can understand it through your writing. Because grant writing is a writing process, and the more you're able to write your ideas out and articulate them, the more likely they will be able to understand them. Keep it simple, keep it direct. Remember that you do not have to speak in intellectual art speak. That's usually not welcome by art reviewers, to try to figure out what it is you're trying to say in this artsy language. Just say it very clearly, explain it like you would to a friend, start to finish, A to Z, all the parts in there. But first you have to get clear about what it is for yourself. Oh man, follow the grant guidelines. Can I highlight this enough? If you have too many words that go beyond the word limit, if you don't have the right size for your JPEGs, if you've put in a doc instead of PDF for your resume, on the cutting room floor it goes. That's one One grant that that reviewer does not have to look at that day, lightens their load, you've done them a big favor. You don't want to end up on the cutting room floor, you want to end up with the funding. So make sure that you follow every guideline that they say and submit it on time with everything complete and double check and triple check that you have. So that's not always easy to do, but it's really important. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get with all the formats being right. I was sizing JPEGs this morning to the right size. So that's exactly what you have to do. Make sure you're giving them what they ask for. Ask yourself what the outcome of the project will be. So what is the public going to see at the end? What are your expectations about that give back? This is a really important component because most grant foundations want to know that if they invest in you, that you are going to then offer something back to the public. That could be an exhibit. That's enough. It could be a film. It could be a book project. It could be a performance. As long as there's some public exhibit at the end, that's a give back. Okay, so know what the outcome is going to be. How will the audience benefit? Might be that they have a great day at the gallery, or they learn something, or they attend your lecture, your talk, your artist talk, or they're inspired, but there's going to be some give back. Maybe there'll be a workshop attached, or a public piece, whatever it is. Make it really clear that there's something that the audience will be able to benefit from at the end. Show that your life's work is on a trajectory and this is a part of it. So as the grant reviewers are looking at your, maybe your website because they've asked for a link, images because they've asked for you to submit 10 images, they're seeing a progression of work that all feels like it's connected, and the project that you are embarking on or asking for funding to embark on is an extenuation of that. If they see that this feels like it's coming from left field, there's no connection, this artist has done this and now wants to do something completely different, that might look like a weak argument to do what you're doing. As opposed to a project that is ongoing and there are stages of development and the funding that they provide will help you take the next step. And then you're going to apply for another grant and you're going to take the next step. They will sometimes ask, if the grant application will sometimes ask, are you applying for any other grants for this project? And if you can say, yes, I've applied for this, I've applied for that, I'm submitting that, that's coming up next month, good. They're seeing your commitment to this project. Now, the first sentence of your narrative should draw them in, should be compelling. Grant reviewers have ways of reviewing, they might look at the images first and get an overall result of what you do and think, okay, this looks like strong work. Let me now read the narrative. Or maybe they do a read through of a short narrative. And then if the short narrative is compelling, they might read the whole long narrative. So the beginning of anything should be pow, really capture their attention. So maybe that first image or that first sentence of the short narrative or the first sentence of the long narrative, whatever it is, the first should really draw them in. It should all be powerful, but you really want to start on an up note and end on an up note as well. Put your strongest work forward. Yeah, let them see your ambition. They're voting for you when they fund your work or your project. They're getting on your team. they're propelling you forward with the funding. So a grant foundation really wants to fund an artist or a project or collaborative, could be a collaborative group of artists that work together on a project that they believe in, they're excited about, they believe that you are capable of carrying forward and through to the end. That's an important thing to demonstrate, that you will see this project through. Yes, I've done things like this before. Yes, I'm excited about doing this. I'm going to do it. I'm committed to it. And I will go forward and do more things like this in the future. They want to see that you're not a flash in the pan. You're committed to your work. You have big ideas. You have creative ideas. You just need a little money to do it. And that's their role. So if you're also, speaking about the money, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I make okay money and I can pay my bills and, I have a car, I take a vacation. Don't feel like you are not eligible for that funding. You are eligible for that funding. If you are sitting there with, like a huge trust fund, which I'm assuming you're not, because you'd be wasting your time, then I'd say just go do your thing. Go and go. Go do your thing with your money and share it with others and create a foundation too. But if you're here, you deserve the funding. So apply. I would never say don't apply. Let them be the judge of that. If that question is a real deal breaker, whether or not you have financial need, they will ask you for your income tax records, and they will ask you for a statement of financial need. You don't have to exclude yourself from writing a grant. Write the grant. Okay, budget. Let's talk about the nitty-gritty of the numbers. So if you have a particular project in mind, now a budget is probably going to be on a grant application that is about a project, which not all of them are. Some are just on merit of what you're doing, and they want to keep funding what you do so you can do more of what you do, just as a creative person in general. But if it's a project grant, they're going to ask you for a budget. So this is where you really want to figure out that question of how much money do I need and what is it going to cover? And the more thorough you can be with your budget, the more it will show that you have thought this through, you've researched the numbers, you're not missing anything, some big number component of what you are asking for, that you are thorough. So perhaps you're applying for other grants, and your income might include the grant that you hope to get from this grant foundation and others that you are applying for. It might also include private donations. Maybe you have friends that have big wallets and they're trying to help you out to get your project underway. It could be in-kind donations. So maybe someone is willing to, say, be your assistant for a project. That's an in-kind donation. They're giving you their time, that's worth money. So you want to include all of this under income. There might be profit that accompanies the work. So perhaps you're going to create a body of large paintings, and you need funding because the materials cost a lot, and you've got this huge work and you need to store it someplace until you have your big show. And you just have to lay out all of this expense, perhaps, before you actually get to the point where you're able to sell it. So you also might be able to sell it, so there's potential profit. Maybe you have a really good sales record of your work, and you can, in a year, after you get the work, you can get profit out of that body of painting. But in the meantime, you just need to be able to afford to pay your bills while you're painting, okay? So there's projected profit. Maybe tickets, registrations, admission, depending on if you're a performance artist or you're going to have a happening or teach a workshop, whatever it is, that there might be some revenue that comes in for your project. Okay, the expenses is kind of a long list, but you can read them, and these are all legit. So like I said, I'll include all of this in the notes if you would like me to send them to you, but your artist fee, that means paying yourself. So grant foundations want artists to pay themselves. So you can put your hourly wage, your time invested in the project, because you're worth it. You wouldn't go and work a part-time job for someone for free. So you're not working for free doing your creative work. You need to be reimbursed for your time. And when you do that, I believe that grant foundations see that you recognize that what you do is work, it's your career, you value your time, you need to be reimbursed for it, you respect your time and what you do. So materials, of course, all the materials that go into a project, production, studio rent. Maybe you need a bigger space. Maybe you just need to afford the space that you have. And studio assistant, utilities, that's Wi-Fi, that's phone, that's maybe it's a truck that you have to rent to deliver the work. Research, also time. May not cost you anything, but it's costing you time. Travel, perhaps you have to go someplace to do this work. You can't do it here, so there's airline expense, there's car rental expense, there's accommodations and lodging. As long as it is all legitimate and it doesn't look like you're giving yourself a vacation to, some beautiful Greek island, then it's fine, as long as it's legitimate. And your meals and your accommodations are reasonable. Promotion, publicity, web design, documentation, documenting your own project. That might be having a videographer film a performance or a talk. It might be having a professional photographer photograph your work on exhibit, on site. And then the contingency fund of what if. So if you notice, I don't have up here building a new studio. Because capital projects are not often funded. So you're on your own for that. Okay? Usually won't. If you find a grant that is about studio renovation, expansion, building a new one, I would be very surprised. Please let me know so I can share that with other people. But it's usually not funded. Okay? Anything that looks like you're getting funding to line your pockets because you're going to sell the house in a year, and then they'll have funded you making more money on the sale of your home and studio. Doesn't look good. So I've never seen funding that is for a studio, with the exception of emergency grants for catastrophe, like a studio fire. So there are funds for emergencies like health issues, like loss of, if you lost a whole body of work because there was a flood in your studio or a fire in your studio, there's money for that, and you can look up emergency grants. They usually say emergency grants in the name of the grant. Okay, so you want to come up with a project title. This is what's likely to be in a grant application. Project title, that should describe what you're about to do, want to do. A description, you may be asked for a short description and a long description. And by long, it could just be 250 to 500 words. It's not that long, which can also be a problem because you have to be concise and say everything succinctly and clearly. Images, you're likely to be asked for images, especially if you're a visual artist. So you want to have good documentation of the work that you've done in the past to include in your application going forward. You'll be asked for an image list or some information, descriptive information about the work that you're showing. So that could be upload an image and then a block pops up asking for the title of the work, the medium, the size, a brief description perhaps. So you've got all your information that is right beside the image. Sometimes that's uploaded as one document, so all of your work is numbered, and then you have all your or your artwork information that's on a separate page, but it's there. You may have an opportunity to include video. So if you do time-based work, video, film, kinetic sculpture, it moves, and it's important to show that. Or sculpture in the round, you want to give someone a 360 view. That's usually an opportunity too to have a link to a YouTube video, or a short video that you can upload. So know that you might have an opportunity to give the grant reviewers more than just static images. A timeline, these are all the maybes with the little stars, right? So maybe you would include a timeline if this is an ongoing project. The timeline will show, I started this project at this point, then this stage, and then this stage, and I'm asking for money for this stage. And then after this, I want to do that next. So a timeline that has to do with the life of a project. Switching gears. And I also want to interject here that there are, where I started with the Maine Arts Commission, National Endowment for the Arts, Artwork Archive, each one of those is a link to great resources of lists of grants. So once I share that whole link list with you, then you'll know where to go for grants, where to look. So, and you'll get your places like Artwork Archive is a very good place. There's other lists out there that others have compiled. So I don't want you to think that when you leave here, you're on your own for finding, where are these grants? Anyway, Kim says there's a lot of money out there. Where is this money? So they'll all be linked, so I'll share that with you if you email me. Okay, other ways of coming up with funding for your project. And this is more where the grant is, you got the grant, you didn't get the grant. Okay, you got the money, didn't get the money. Sometimes you got half the money. Sometimes that happens. Like you might ask for 10,000 and you get 5. And they'll ask you sometimes in the grant application, would you take a percentage of funds? Would you take less? So that's up to you. If you can't do the whole project without the whole amount, then you might say no, or you might say, yes, I'll take whatever you give me, and I'll go find the funding someplace else too. Up to you. Okay, so it's not always an all or nothing. So with crowdfunding, you are more in charge of how this goes, where the grant writing is, you got the money, you didn't get the money, or maybe you got some of the money. So with Kickstarter, for example, and I've done a Kickstarter campaign, so I know this one really well, you decide you're going to do a Kickstarter campaign, you register with Kickstarter, you present what your project is going to be, they give you permission to run a campaign. You have a goal of how much you want to receive. Let's just say it was $5,000 in my case. And then you decide when it's going to start and when it's going to end. I believe you can do a 30-day round or 45 or 60. So 1 month, 1.5 months, 2 months of grant funding, or not grant funding, crowdfunding. They recommend the shortest one, by the way. And then you do everything you can in your power to get the word out. You use Facebook, you use Instagram, you knock on your neighbor's doors, you send emails, you get the word out that you're raising money to do X. If you don't get the entire amount, you get nothing. So it's really important if you're going to do the Kickstarter route that you make a real commitment to it, you choose your timing well so that you're not busy with other things, and you devote yourself to raising the funds. So I actually had a goal of 5,000 and I raised 7,500. So it worked out well. And I thought, okay, that was right, because maybe if I had chosen 70, like 80, 8,000, I would have not gotten nothing, because I raised 7,500. So make sure your goal is achievable and a little bit of a stretch maybe, but definitely doable. So Kickstarter is really common for creatives. GoFundMe is more geared towards someone has a medical issue, cancer, medical bills, and they're trying to raise funding for someone to get, care or help. It's not that artists don't use GoFundMe, it's just that it's more towards this person needs help medically or some crisis. And that is not an all or nothing. You can take what you get. By the way, these crowdfunding sites take a percentage. I think it was 5% or 3%, one or the other. So they get a little bit of a chunk of change from what you've collected. Indiegogo, I can't remember if they take an all or nothing or not, but they're great for art projects too. They're just not as well known. So this can accompany the funding that you're trying to raise that you're grant writing for. You've already done a lot of the work. You've already got the images together, and you've written your narrative and your statement. Now you just need the willingness to kind of stick your neck out there and toot your horn so that other people help you in your project. With these projects, it is really important that there's a big give back component. So this cannot look like you just need money to buy something that's not necessary or fancy things up. It's really got to be like, I have something to offer to the public, to a community, to a group, and I need funding from all of you, my supporters, to help me do this project so I can do a big give back thing. Fiscal sponsorship is another completely different way to get funding. So with fiscal sponsorship, it allows you to use a nonprofit entity to receive funding. So I'll use my own for example. So Fractured Atlas is a fiscal sponsor for artists of all types. And you register, you tell them what you do, they review the type of work that you do. There has to be a big give back component. And they allow you then to use them as a conduit for funding. So Fractured Atlas is a nonprofit 501c3. I am not. Okay? But if someone gives money to my project through Fractured Atlas, they receive a tax deductible exemption, tax exemption. So there's a big bonus to the giver. So that's great for them. And you can receive small, large donations, everything. You can keep it ongoing. You can just have on your website that they can donate, a supporter can donate through Fractured Atlas and get a break on that money that they gave to you, and you get the funding. And Fractured Atlas takes a little chunk of that too. I think it's also 5%. You could also contact a nonprofit, ideally one that you have a relationship with and you're in partnership with. So I'll give you an example of that one. So I organize the Rockland Sculpture Race, and I do it as a volunteer. And Rockland Main Street, which is a nonprofit, I work with them to have the event at the same time as the summer solstice celebration. So in writing grants to fund the Rockland Sculpture Race, I can partner with Rockland Main Street to write a grant under the umbrella of Rockland Main Street's 501c3. The money goes to Rockland Main Street, and then it can come to me, and then I can disperse it and pay for artist supplies, etc. So if you have nothing to do with a nonprofit and you approach them to use them as a fiscal sponsor, you might get a no, unless there's something in it for them, like they get 15% of the amount given. But it does open up, which, so you can work out your own arrangement with them, but there's not a lot of incentive for a nonprofit that has no connection to you to be your fiscal sponsor. But it does allow you to write grants as an organization. Because now, like Kim Bernard is no longer an individual artist, I'm under the fiscal sponsorship of Rockland Main Street nonprofit, and I can write grants as an organization. So there's a little bit of crossover there. Okay, let's see what else we've got. All right, a few more tips, just to reiterate. Be sure that your submission, your grant submission, is clear, that it has good direction and goals articulated in your narrative. Only write a grant what you really, really, really want to do, for many reasons. One of them being it's going to give you the mojo to get through the process. Because sitting and writing a grant and pulling this all together takes some discipline. After you've done the first 1, 2, then you have files where, I can pull this from that last grant, or this from the one I wrote before, and copy and paste and put it in the next one. But the first 1, 2, you really gotta work hard to get that out. Start small amounts that you're needing and applying for, modest grant, and start local, start regional, so that the pool, your competition is smaller. Just start. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get going. Like, even if you don't get it, it's okay. Once you just hit submit, it's like, I did it, right? And then you'll be encouraged to try it again. And then if you get an email saying, you're the recipient of the blah, 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 and you received blah, 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 it's like, yes, happy days, okay? So it's important that you just get going. All right, so a little time to finish writing if you need it, and we have until 4:00, right? Okay, so we have a little time for questions if anybody has questions. Yeah?
The first question is, those grants and the crowdfunding, are they considered as income and I have to pay taxes on it, or is the full amount available for students?
Yes, it's all considered income. Yes, it's income, and you have to claim it on your taxes, all of it. All of it that you don't spend on your materials and your accommodations, and your lodging, and your travel, and
Okay,
if you spend it, it's just like when you file Schedule C as a sole proprietor, employee, or a person of one, okay, sole proprietor. So if you have expenses to offset that income, to wash. But yes, you have to claim it as income. Good question, yes?
I'm going to tailgate that question with, if I'm the actual foundation and I'm giving out money, so did I pay any taxes on the money that I'm handing out?
So that would depend.
So it's tax-free because of what you just said.
Okay, so if you gave it, if you're, say, an individual, you're just you're not a nonprofit, or you are a nonprofit?
I'm about to become.
All right, so I don't know the answer on the nonprofit question, but I can tell you that as an individual, if you make a donation through Fractured Atlas for your project, okay, you are getting tax exemption for that. You're getting income, now you have to claim it. I can't.
There's so many layers on this.
Okay, so I expenses works for nonprofits, it's probably like any other business, but there's other, I can't even answer that.
But this gentleman gave me money through Fracture Atlas, so he can get credit, that when I heard you earlier.
Yes.
So, not that he did,
Yeah.
I know that. So
Yeah.
his money comes through what I'm doing to fund her. So he gets credit and she pays taxes.
Yeah,
I'm in the middle,
right,
and how am I looked at by the IRS? You know what I mean? So
I
it's-
can't even answer
that
that.
sounds like laundry money, you know.
Okay, so,
It is,
so,
it is, really, kind
so
of.
Fractured Atlas,
You would have to do the taxes like you
Yeah.
do it for the foundation, so it's really
That's
the
it.
same thing.
Okay.
You're
I'm
getting
just-
funding and you'll be
I'm
able to write off what you
going
gave
to these new
and
levels of
why.
like, and
Right.
I'm used to doing things as an individual, now I'm bringing in a team,
yeah,
and it's like,
accountants,
well, I have lawyers and accountants
Yeah.
too, but at the same time, you have the experience
yeah,
of
so.
a different avenue. So-
Right, so what I can tell you is the whole reason I started a Fractured Atlas account is someone came to me who I only remotely knew and said, we just received an inheritance. My mother left me money, and with that money, she wanted me to fund something in the arts, something that has to do with the environment, and something that has to do with education. And Kim, you fit those three things. And if you set something up so that my donation is tax exempt, I would like to give you a donation. Whoa, okay, Fractured Atlas, yeah,
Okay,
let's do it.
all right, so that's why that did was there, okay.
Right.
I understand that example.
Yeah, I can't answer for a nonprofit, that's a
Yeah.
bigger entity that I can't advise on.
And the reason I'm establishing nonprofit status is to be more accessible to state and federal funding. Like you said, how serious are you? So that's where I feel it to be advantageous to keep going forward with that direction.
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
all right, other questions, yeah.
Give examples of the range and the types of accountability or proof that grantors might wish to have, please.
Yeah, so accountability, what's the accountability look like? So sometimes, especially if it's a small, modest grant, it might look like a letter, a receipt. I received a $1,500 grant one time for a camera. There's a receipt. That's it, easy. I received a $25,000 grant for, this is the Piscataqua Region Arts Advancement Grant, and I did monthly reporting. That was a big grant. And, you know, I did a lot of, this is what I'm doing, this is what I said I do, this is what I'm doing, and I'm doing it every month. And actually, that's on my blog, I made it public, because a lot of people write that grant. So I figured, if I'm telling the grant foundation, I'm just gonna tell everybody what I'm doing with the money, right? And then it'll help people that apply for it later. So it's on par with the amount that you receive. $500 grant, they probably won't even ask you. $25,000 grant, they wanna know. What else have we got? Yeah,
You see a big division between on the one hand you have artists, makers, trying to get money to fund a project. On the other hand, you could have someone who's, you know, a very small two-person business who's trying to make a creative product that they want to sell and fund. How do these people look at that? Like, I want to fund an artist, but you're a small business.
yeah.
Is there a division there between these?
Yeah, so this is matchmaking, okay? And you wanna make sure that you look at the foundation and who they funded in the past. Maybe a foundation that you're looking at is funding really edgy, you know, contemporary work that it can't be monetized. That might not has their, their people, their projects that they want to fund. So you don't wanna waste your time, because there's a lot of applications out there too, that you could be spending your time on, so don't waste your time on something that's not a good fit, go find a better fit. Another way you can find good fits and grants is to look at resumes of other creatives or entrepreneurs that are doing work kind of like you, and they've received grants from these foundations. Now, those will probably be good foundations for you to look at because the artist has, they've received funding from that, so you should be able to receive funding for that. So pay attention to creatives that you know or follow and see where they're getting their funding. Then go look at foundation up. You'll end up having a repertoire over the course of the year of grants that you apply for. And then, when I get emails, I'm just scanning eligibility, yes, no, delete, or, I'm gonna check this one out in another month. It's coming due. So you just build, first you have to come up with your list, and then you can tweak it from there. Good questions.
Kim, I had a question. We have a lot of just single people doing like tea towels, cards,
Yeah.
body products, that kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, is this something?
Yeah, so handmade crafts. There's funding for handmade crafts, startup businesses. Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's a matter of finding the right ones. And I again would go to other craftspeople that are creating work like that and see where do they get their startup money? Where do they apply? Well, there's the Maine Crafts Association. See where's their what are the resources here? Where do people that do this get their startup money? Yeah.
So what do you think is an acceptable amount of artist salary?
$1 million.
So I guess it has to do with your level of comfort in living, what your needs are. Like, do you have family? Are you solo? Do you live in your van? Do you have 4 kids, right? Those two people are gonna need different amounts and would probably, in seeking a job, would look for different types of jobs that fund their lifestyle. I've always shopped at thrift stores and bought used cars and lived frugally because that to me equals time to make art. So how little can you live on, right? That's a good way to think about it, but also what do I really need that's sustainable? What do I also feel like I have the expertise that warrants what income, right? If there's someone who has no experience and is coming out of college, they have a certain amount to offer. But for someone with 30 years of experience and a lot of experience under their belt has more to offer and can get a higher hourly. So that has to be considered too. I say live on the cheap, but I also have to say be paid for what you deserve. You have a worth. What is that? So that all has to be taken into the mix.
And the price of creativity is challenging. No, it's your ideas. I can spew 100 ideas in a minute, and then you're only gonna pay me my rate for 1 minute of my time. No, 60 years. So it's tough.
Yeah,
And
and then you
understand
have
that
to,
about yourself.
and then you have to be able to get that pay. So you can think your worth is $300 an hour, but if you know it'll pay more than 50, what's your worth, right? Such a complicated question.
It is. It's a good one.
Yeah,
What about trying again after they turn you down?
try again, try again, try again,
It's
try
okay
again.
to just
Yep.
keep going, but.
Yep, and ask for feedback when you don't get I'm sure, because it was still work for them, but I'll tell you anyway, if you don't get the grant, ask if you can get some feedback on your review, your grant review, and learn from it. And the Maine Arts Commission makes it public, at least for the finalists, so you can sit in virtually.
So it could just be the pool you went against that year, you should try again the next year.
Yeah. But also, don't pitch them the same exact thing, because they will probably, they deny it once, they'll probably deny it again. But learn from whatever they give you and make it better the next year. Yeah.
I want to circle back to the fee conversation. Are you always putting in hourly rate, or, and if so, like, then how do you calculate it? If it's for a big project that you want to do and it involves travel and then the production of the art afterwards, are you just putting the hourly rate, or are you kind of like guessing the time that it's going to do for each of those pieces?
Try to come as close as you can with hourly and hours.
Okay.
Yeah. There's, I just learned about a artist's wage. It's called Wage. It's through a New York foundation. It's the equivalent. It's what artists should receive for an hourly wage based on what wage.org, I think. Yeah, I can add that on to the number scale.
You use grant writers sometimes?
Do I use what?
Grant writers.
Do I?
Yeah.
No.
So, I've been a dancer, a performance artist, I do poetry, I make images, and now I'm doing these giant books. I make books, small books. So, my trajectory is different media, but there's a through line of content, I would say. So, can I talk about that? I mean, how would I talk about that?
Multimedia artist.
Okay.
Yeah, multidisciplinary. Yeah,
Okay.
you can, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, one more question. Yeah.
If I wanted to learn welding,
Yeah.
let's just say, because that's something I've always wanted to do, to make metal sculpture, could I use a grant to go to a workshop at Haystack to learn welding?
Yes, you can write a grant for any kind of education. Yes, and that reminds me, I have a grant writing workshop coming up this week. If you look on my website, you'll get the details. So yes, definitely. Not a degree program,
Right.
but a class, yes. So please email me, I'll send you the notes with links.
What's the email?
Right? Right here, info@kimbernar.com. And as you leave, on the right, you'll see where to put your sticky notes color coded. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.